Hi, everybody. Good morning and welcome to Data is Love. I'm super excited to have my friend and colleague, Mitam, joining me this morning. And, as we're getting started, and before we start talking about leaders and decision making, I just want to share with people how we actually met. Which was you grabbing me as I was leaving an event, introducing yourself, and then forcing me to come visit you at your house a couple of weeks later. Which is, I'm just going to say for anybody out there, if you want to make friends, this is one technique that can be really effective. Just grab people and be like, hi, I want you to come eat at my house. And then you made me help you clean up enormous jackfruit. And I had sticky fingers for a week after that. So welcome to Data is Love. I'm so excited that you said yes to joining me, and just tell us a little bit about you. Who are you?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mitam, and Aparna is still right. I love feeding people. So any excuse I have to bring people into my home, I welcome it. I grew up in a fishing village in Vietnam, so I'm very communal, and food is such a big part of my life. And it's the way I connect and really welcome people. And to just sit and share our lives with each other. And I knew that Aparna would appreciate fresh jackfruit because that's, I think it's one way to build community. So I'm so grateful that we get to spend some more time today.
Okay, so you're one of, I think, the best dot connectors that I know. You're watching so many things happen in the world, and I think you use a lot of that awareness to work with leaders and help them make better decisions. And so, I'm just curious, what are you noticing about leaders and who they spend time with outside of work? And how does it shape some of the decisions they make at work?
Yeah, I think Aparna and I have been in this community. We're both in Seattle right now. I split my time on the East Coast as well. And I've invested so much in Seattle, and I've really observed how different community members show up at work depends on who they spend their time with outside of work. So it's just, especially in such a massive time of transition, as what we see all the layoffs last week, all the time we've spent with ourselves in the last 2 years, there's a bit of a reckoning and a need for alignment with who we truly are and how we want to live our human experience with what the world needs right now. So that's when I launched my practice. It's like I was having so many conversations with people who wanted to have more alignment with their family, with what they really value and are passionate about. And, I'm seeing more and more people root into who they truly are. And that takes time first with yourself and then with your community, and then really putting your work out into the world. So if I see more than 5 of my friends moving towards a certain direction, I see that as a trend. So there's a lot of folks moving towards energy, for example, completely quitting a public sector job and going to private practice after they launch something national. I'm seeing a lot of folks from tech really have a reckoning with who they are, how they lead. And I have this 3-hour workshop that I go through with a lot of them to just how do you do the inner work? How do you sit with all the things that you value? And how do you really project out your life and seeing where things are headed? So I love it so much. I love sitting with people as they tackle these gnarly things that they haven't really had time to be listened to, and to have space to process it.
Okay, you said, I wrote down a couple of things, but there's one thing that you said around how do we want to live our human experience? And I want to hear more about the reckoning that's happening in tech, for so many reasons, and not including the fact that Amazon just announced that it's going to lay off 10,000 people, and
Mhm.
they're one of the biggest employers in our region, right? And what impact is that going to have for our region? But I want to actually start with politics, because I feel like a week ago, many of us spent many nights staying awake, watching those ballots get counted, right? Like not literally, but watching news. And you spent quite a lot of your career as a political operator. And so I'm just curious, like, what are you thinking with respect to leaders in politics and this need for greater alignment so that we can make better decisions about our human experience?
Yeah, that's a big one. I would describe myself as a recovering politico. I spent a lot of time in government, both on the campaign side and inside the machine, both at the city level and at the state level, and to a little bit on the national level. So that's part of why I started my practice, because what we need more than ever are leaders who focus on the work and not the pulpit that they're on, and which is really hard. I think there's my friends who are in DC, they're like, maybe 30% of politicians are there for the right reason. And the power is really enticing. Um, the influence is really enticing, and the impact you can make is really enticing. And so when I went into City Hall, I worked for both the mayor's office and the governor's office. And every day you're drinking from a fire hose, and you really have to know why you're there, because if you don't, I've seen people completely destroyed. And I've been on the impact end of, when leaders are not aligned, the way they show up is filled with a lot of fear filled with a lot of loss of the power. And I knew that I was not there for myself. I knew that I was there as a vessel for the community to have what it needs to be done through me, and that I was a bridge, and that I didn't own any of the power. But if you don't go into politics with that mindset, it can destroy you. If you're not
Mm-hmm.
connected to who you are with the people you serve and the impact that you can make, you think it's all about you. And then you have these term limits. And so you make convenient decisions that might be good for you and your office to maintain your position of power, but not for the long term sustainable systems change, which is something I'm so passionate about. And so now I get to choose the people I work with, the projects that I work on, and I know exactly where that time and energy is going. And I don't want any credit for it, which is so refreshing because it brings me so much inner peace, which is it's very difficult to go through life with that as a politician when you have such a public life and so much of it is transactional. And so if someone's thinking about running for office, or if you're a current elected leader, I would say, like, think about how your role can be transformational and not transactional. And you're seeing some of those leaders, and you can absolutely tell when it's genuine, and look at their track record. And it's hard for them too, but I think that's the direction of leadership that we would need in politics in this time of pretty massive national and global reckoning. The political trends are everywhere. I'm really blessed with this great network where I can kind of see the worldview of where things are headed and what my friends are experiencing in their own countries, and what we're experiencing in the US is not a silo. The trends are pretty clear of where the world's headed, and we need more aligned transformational leaders.
We need more transformational leaders. Okay, so you said when leaders are not aligned, there is a lot of fear. And when you can't connect with the people you serve, it'll destroy you, right? Like not being in alignment will destroy you. And so I want to go back to the tech piece, right? Like there is a reckoning, and I'm curious, what are you noticing
Mhm.
about leaders in tech? And how is who they seek changing how they show up?
Yeah, I have I've have some tech clients, and I also have a lot of friends who are in tech, from C-suite level down to engineering and folks in CSR. And so it's tough to talk about them as an aggregate. I would say
No.
a common thread and a complaint that I've heard from folks in tech heavy cities is that there's a rootlessness, that there is you know, it's very hard to root in the community that you live in because you might move to another opportunity in a few months. And it's very, very tough to be values aligned unless you work with a really great team to move the things you want to move and be connected to the humanity that you're a part of. So, and sometimes you can be, I know this is called data's love. You can be too data driven, and you need to move to being more human driven. And so when I work with my tech clients, one of the things that I prioritize is connecting them to community and how I was helping one of my friends. She's the keynote for like the biggest architecture conference in the EU in a few weeks. And her whole talk is around, how about like less than 1% of the population designed for the experience of billions. So the folks in these tech companies are doing the user experience that the rest of us are living. And if you're not connected and you're not doing real community-based research and design thinking, the tech comes before the humanity. And AI is like so far ahead of like, we're not there yet with AI, of like all the scary things that people are thinking of what's to come. But how tech workers show up now, I think some of my biggest struggles with my tech friends is that they are not impacted by the decisions they make. So they can make terrible decisions for humanity and won't personally be impacted by it because they make $500,000 a year and they think that they got there because of their brilliance and not because of their privilege. And so there's a lack of self-awareness and real impacts on the communities in which they serve that is out of alignment because they are, in terms of late stage capitalism, they are the ones who are benefiting most from it, and there will be no harm done to them. And it's so interesting as people are transitioning out, I'm sure there'll be a lot of personal reckoning with whether their role, as people are transitioning their careers into tech because it's a good living. And as they're exiting now, I'm pretty sure they're coming to a reckoning of like, is this what I really want to do? And what aspects, like there's amazing things happening in tech too. Like I have friends who are, feeding millions of people through these tech companies. There's like an immense transfer of wealth with BIPOC folks entering the workforce. There's incredibly good things happening. And there's also a reckoning with the individual and how they leverage the technology to serve humanity.
The biggest struggle is that you're not impacted by the decisions you make. It's huge.
Yeah, it's big.
Huge. And I feel like, without making it too much of a blanket statement, I think that that's true of leaders, period. A couple of years ago, when we were in the thick of the forest fires, I had a leader that I worked with tell me that they were a climate refugee. And I was like, how explain, and this person was, escaping the Bay Area to their home somewhere in the mountains with better air. And I was like, I don't think that this is actually the definition of climate refugee. You're temporarily displaced from your primary residence to one of your many other residences. Yeah. And and so how do we get people to see that they are actually connected? Because even though, I think a lot of leaders, whether they're in tech or, in large nonprofits or foundations, the truth of the matter is that lives are really comfortable. And because of socioeconomics in a highly segregated country like the US, but I think also really everywhere in the world, we're not meeting them at work. We're also not running into them at the grocery store because we're probably not shopping in the same places. We're less likely to live in the same communities of them. There's a high level of segregation, right? Like you never have to face poverty in any real way if you are somebody who makes $500,000 or more a year. And so what does it look like to start to create alignment and start to get people a little bit more proximate? And is it possible to do it at scale?
Yeah, I absolutely. So some of the teams that I've worked with, I love convening facilitations and retreats, and I love working with people one-on-one because not only do we get to work with the inner person when you get to know the lay of the land with their team, and then how they show up in community. So I have this framework that we'll share with you called the VAR discernment framework. VAR stands for values, alignment, and resources. So if you, I am not one to like give critique without resources or tools.
Yeah.
So the VAR discernment framework, and I'm doing this week. I have a couple of weeks where I might need to travel in December, and I was like, there's some family priorities right now that I really need to take care of, and I use this for myself. So the first one is values. Like, I spend a good hour, my 3-hour session, just walking people through what their true values are. So you have to revisit these regularly and think about the root of all your decisions of why it's essential to you and how are you showing up in the world. And the alignment piece is when you have key pivot points in your life, the alignment piece is determine whether it matches your goals, your purpose, and your mission. And I think sometimes thinking long term about however many years you have left, that is a pretty clear place to align your values with whether or not it matches what you want to accomplish in life. And the last thing, the R, is resources. Measure the time, money, and energy it'll take. And the energy is a big one. I'm finding new ways to support my friends who are parents, and they're just so exhausted and fatigued all the time. It's like, okay, what they need is like not to send them flowers, but for me to show up and spend time with them or like with their kids. And this is a big one for me too, because I'm a cancer survivor. I'm coming up next month on my 11 year of being cancer free, and I don't wish that experience on anybody.
Anybody.
And what it gave me is both a sense of urgency, but also the prioritization of me, like it's necessary for me to have peace. I can absolutely not function in any form of stress. I feel it right away in my body. And
Yeah.
so, and this means, the people that you interact with too, is if you are interacting with people that you're saying that you're serving at work and you don't spend any time with these communities, are you really living out your values? I was like, Jean, I'm seeing a note, intentional friendships and align with all people, be curious about others. Yes, be curious and also be present. How much time are you spending in community? So when I work with my clients and they allow me the space to have 1 to 3 days to facilitate, that's not them spending only time with me. They are, I think one of the biggest things when you are a leader is, are you going to the places that you're serving? Are you meeting them where they are? And so I love taking folks and connecting the dots with the real doers who are on the ground providing everyday basic needs and services to people who've been historically left out of the tech ecosystem or whatever, or the financial system, whatever field you're working in. So when you use this values, alignment, and resources discernment framework, you really are sitting with yourself and measuring what you say you're doing with what you are currently doing and where you actually want to go. And that takes, Ray Dalio talks a lot about radical honesty. And that's usually with others, but I think the person you need to be most honest with, and only you can make this call, is yourself. And that is the most difficult relationship to have, because you can lie to everybody else about how woke you are, how great of a leader you are. But at the end of the day, if there's something gnawing at your gut, you're like, well, I'm leading this diverse team, but I'm spending all my vacations and birthdays and weddings with people that don't align with my values of diversity. What is that? Like, and for me, it's like brings so much joy to my life. Like I spent this weekend, one of my friends like rented out an entire theater for her birthday to go watch Wakanda in community. Like I'm constantly in community. So whatever you invest in the places you're at, it will reciprocate. And I feel like when people are not doing that, they're missing out, because it's so wonderful to be in community. And I have so much wisdom from learning and being in place and in person. And if we're not able to do that, we do it virtually, So see if what you're saying your values are and how you're leading actually match with how you're spending time outside of work, and that they're not thanks, GLT. Yes, it begins at home in your mind and your body, and also in the choices and who you spend your time with. So I'm big on audits as well. I've often asked my clients to track how they're spending their week, how they spend their time, and who with, and does that match with their values and their goals, not only personally, but also for their business. So do a self audit and see what that shows you.
So not only how you spend your time, which a lot of us do, right? Our days and weeks are accounted for, but who you spend time with. So many years ago, long time, almost 10 years ago, I was living and working in India, and I worked for a little organization called Teach for India, very much like Teach for America. And one of the requirements of the job for everybody, especially people that weren't in the classroom, was that you needed to spend one day every month in a school. You needed to be in a classroom environment. And when I first got the job, I was, trying to build a new almost like a venture funded program within the organization. So I wasn't, I wasn't really part of Teach for India proper. And they said to me, like, look, you need to spend one day a month, at a minimum. One day a month is what you need to spend in the classroom. And I was really annoyed. I remember going to my orientation and thinking, I'm a senior leader. Why do you want me in a classroom? Like, it's a waste of my time. And I think that year was probably one of the most humbling professionally, because when you are face to face with somebody, there's an opportunity to check your assumptions. There's an opportunity to have just a tiny bit of insight about why they're making the choices they are. And there's no substitute for it. You can read all the books in the world, and you can read a lot of podcasts, and both you and I love reading. We're voracious readers. I've got my stack behind me. I know that your stack is probably behind you as well. But there's no substitute for spending that time and engaging with folks. As a coach, right, among many of the hats that you wear, what do you see when leaders get to not the other end, but right, like when they're traveling this path of living in greater alignment, spending time with community, being proximate, doing these audits, what's possible?
Yeah, it's so funny. When I was thinking about us chatting today, I was like, this is going to be so cheesy. And at the end of the day, the holidays are coming, so I can be a little cheesy. It's really about love. It's really about how you show up and how you feel inside. Because, as people are rising, some people's definition of success is like, how many awards do I get? How many articles am I written up on? How many connections do I have on LinkedIn? And when you are real with yourself, the first thing that will shift is the peace you have inside. And that is not get accolades for, and the work that you do will be immeasurable. First thing that's possible. And one of my favorite examples is I had a friend who called me just like, and I heard just like complete desperation in her voice. I was like, what is going on? And she's like, we have a brand new baby, and my husband is about to quit his job tomorrow. And he makes a very high 6-figure salary at a very large tech company. And I don't know how we're going to survive. And I was like, and she's like, can you talk to him tomorrow? So he comes over and we talk through where he's at, what some of his frameworks are of how he's going to make this decision, how he's going to leave, and one of his main points was, I'm tired of having to reintroduce myself to my daughter at the end of the day every day.
Mm.
And that was the pivot point for him. And so he quit the job, and now he's making more money. He launches
Yeah.
and, you know, to be a consultant in tech, with especially with the skills he has, and he's spending twice as much time with his daughter now, and he's supporting his, like, providing the time for his wife to do what she loves, which is writing and
Mm-hmm.
world. And she has such a deep impact on this community, that it's just frees up. And it's, you know, I think sometimes the fear of a major transition and really to live into who you truly are is very scary, because there's so much risk, right? But if you go through it and you're like, okay, this is, how much money do I actually really need to make? What is most valuable to me in addition to the money? How is my time spent? How much freedom
Yeah.
do I want to have? How much impact do I want to make? And so what's possible on the other side is you just making time and space for yourself. And when you interact with other people, you're just more connected, and it's, the money will still be there. The relationships and what's, like, you know, some folks really want to focus on their health.
Yeah.
And so it's just the things that are really valuable to you will arise. And it is absolutely wonderful to see my clients like come onto the other side because, you know, and it's tough. Like I've had sessions where people are like, this is like, start just crying because they have, one of my friends, she's been in tech, one of the top, like one of the founders of a major tech company. And she started crying and she's like, I can't do this. I've never asked myself these questions, and I'm so disappointed in myself that I didn't. I need a break. So we took like a 2-week break, and then she was ready to continue. But these are really tough questions. But it is absolutely incredible, and things will start flowing as soon as you make the decision to shift.
Somebody once said to me, look, the world that we live in, we're in the top 5% of the world.
Mm,
We live incredibly privileged lives. A lot of us live incredibly privileged lives, and we're best positioned
mm,
to make the leap.
mm.
Best positioned to make the leap because working towards living in better alignment with our values, we're not a person that is in a refugee camp in Afghanistan, right? We are well resourced, largely well networked people,
Yeah.
and we need to do that. Like the world needs us to actually live in, and so much is possible. Like so much opens up when
Yeah.
you're able to do that, and that's really stuck with me over the years. Is that I'm not comparing myself to somebody who lives on an island in the Pacific that's getting flooded.
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm stably housed, well-resourced individual. So yeah, what excuses do I have? Like actually none. I want to spend maybe the last couple of minutes just hearing from you about, if I've never done this work before, right? And I'm so terrified, as I think many of us are, to
Wow.
do these personal audits.
Yeah.
Where do we start, and what is the burden for companies, for organizations to support their people in doing it?
Yeah. So a lot of companies have budgets for professional development, and you can always hire a coach. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to answer some questions, and we can have like an intro conversation. Um, and you know, and there's tons of books out there and frameworks. Like start with the free resources that I listed on my website at lamdi.co. That's there on the screen. So there's like everything from one of my favorite tools for the end of year is the 1-page strategic plan for your work. And at the end, there's like a 50 top like life hacks. I'm big into these frameworks. And so like give yourself some time and space and start, if you have a workplace that is has the resource of a professional development budget, you can always ask HR of how you can hire a coach. And start having space and time to be with yourself. Stillness is very, very difficult. And we haven't covered this yet, especially for those of us who've had trauma at work, who've been running and running and running and wanted to succeed and excel, to not face our shadows. And this is, in order to get to the other side, you have to do some deep shadow work and be able to face yourself. Like my friend who cried because I had two friends, one in France and one in New York, who just couldn't, they were so disappointed in themselves that they've never allowed the time to do this. And it's for a reason, because it feels really good to work and get accolades and climb the ladder. And at some point you're like, what is left of my life but work? And so take time to be present with yourself. And start there. And then this framework will help, these tools will help. And if you need more, you need actual specifics about, like, if there's a specific aspect of your life that you want to focus on and you want more resources, you can also follow me on Goodreads. I read like over 200 books a year. So if you want to have some resources, there's some books there as well. But start with just the simplest thing is just to make time to journal and be with yourself.
I love it. I love it. It's accessible. It's free. It's free.
Absolutely free.
It's free-ish. Yeah.
And it's possible.
And it's possible. And it doesn't, you don't need a $50 leather bound, gorgeous journal, right? What you said, I just want to say it again. We don't want to ever get to a place where we're asking ourselves, like, what is left of my life but work? Yeah. That's not where we want to be. And I think that there's something so beautiful about being with doers and being in community, because you get to see how change can happen while having your cup filled.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. Mitam, thank you so much for being here with me. I'm going to be thinking about this conversation for the rest of the day and weeks. If you don't already follow her, for the people that are listening in, I highly recommend connecting with her on LinkedIn. And I highly, highly, highly recommend also following her on Instagram. Her handle is làmdi.co, because not only will you get nuggets that are going to help you think differently about your personal life, but there's so much good food content that I really appreciate it. Feed your people, eat in community, don't microwave and eat it at your desk. Like, our bodies are never thankful when we're doing that, you know? So thank you so much. I'm so excited to know you and learn from you.
Thank you, Aparna. This has been so beautiful. So that was Scott. He runs a construction company, and his wife runs, she was running the most amazing yoga studio here. So appreciate being in community with you. Thank you. This has been such a joy, the whole journey with having this live stream. I so appreciate you and the team. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your week. I hope to hear from some of you.
Yeah, write to her. Bye, everybody.